Good evening, Canterbury. I'm Mike Yardley. Welcome to NewsMakers, where we debate the week's issues through Canterbury eyes. It's election eve and it's local body politics that takes centre stage on the show this week. And joining us to review the campaign and to preview tomorrow, a local media panel. From the press, senior reporter Glenn Conway, from Newstalk TV, chief reporter Joe Scott, and freelance journalist with the NBR, MG Business and Property Investor, Chris Hutching. Thank you very much for joining us. We are going to start on the more sort of macro front, the issues that resonated the most through this campaign. What grabbed your attention? What will the campaign be remembered for? Glenn?
Property transparency and openness of the council, I think, was always, I maintained from the start, was going to be the issue, and I hold to that today. I think Anderson particularly went on the attack on that one, and I think it resonated. And Parker was playing catch-up on that issue, I believe, anyway. I think that was the big issue, in my opinion. What
stood out for you, Joe?
The same thing, really. And also, coupled with that, the whole drive and criticism of Parker's unilateral decision-making. And it's quite interesting, because when you talk to Team Parker, they say the same thing about Jim Anderton. So, and particularly, even before, that was an issue before the quake and even after the quake as well, with Anderton saying, well, Bob's not using his councillors, he's not using community boards. So, the one-man band.
It's amazing how in so many previous local body elections you would expect rates to always be a perennial issue. It hasn't really fired at all this time. Is that because they're both pledging to be full of restraint?
I think the campaign this time was remarkably absent of any issues, really. I think the earthquake swamped the whole thing. And as you say, you know, in the past, it's often a scrap about rates. We did have this sort of muted thing coming through. Jim did a very good job. He kept his message the same, talking about transparency and democracy and inclusion. But Bob, I don't think he addressed any of these.
What about something like public transport that we'll all talk about from time to time? You know, Chris bikes happily. He is the vanguard. He is, you know, at the cutting edge of how we should all be living.
Thank you, Mike.
We've got Bob and his train set. We've got Jim and his buses. Why hasn't that really taken fire? I mean, these are major, major issues before the city, aren't they?
One word, earthquake. Exactly what Chris said.
Now.
Yeah, I think that some of those issues like the light rail have always been a red herring, and this is part of Bob's mastery. I think it's a complete fantasy. We're not going to see it in our lifetime, but it's the sort of thing that people love to rave and talk about. And Jim did his best to bring up some of those issues when he talked about the expense of the bus exchange and you know, some of the best ways forward there. But again, this wasn't something that was captured many people. None of the candidates seemed to engage greatly on it, as far as I could tell.
Do you think the good voter of Christchurch has been given a great selection of candidates for the Christchurch mayoralty?
It's been abysmal.
Really?
I'm new to the city, less than a year here. I was staggered at the low quality of candidates in the mayoralty race. 14 candidates. 2 obviously were gunning for the title. 1 or 2 came out and said they were the third viable candidate, according to them. Seriously disappointed. I couldn't believe it.
I think that's typical of Christchurch, though. I mean, I think this election is the first one in a long time it's actually genuinely been a 2-horse race. Prior to that, we sort of always seem to have one main candidate. Gary Moore before him, Vicky Buck. There's always just one candidate. And so this time, there's actually 2. And of course, you always have the others that put their names in, and they're generally the same each election.
But what is stopping, particularly in this campaign, what stopped a credible, high-profile, let's say, business person stepping up to the plate to take on Bob Parker? Why did it have to be a political operator from way back?
Because most people who have a real job don't want to give it up. And I think it's a wee bit harsh to say that, you know, all the candidates were miserable so-and-sos, but it's true we didn't have many new ones. There's some that had attained a bit of profile, like Cotter in our area and Edgeware. So we did have some extra ones there, but it's true, it's really disappointing to see the same crew coming through, and I guess they have some support in their own little area. Maybe they've had an issue that they've had some success at, you know. A couple of names, I suppose, come to mind, Corbett and Wells. They seem to have a little area where they sit there, and how many terms have there been there now, Mike? About
would be, what, 3 or 4?
Yeah, at least.
4 or 5?
it really is time to get new blood. But it takes an unusual combination of personal circumstances to make someone want to stand for council. And I suspect it's probably when they're running out of a job, maybe, or retiring, or perhaps their situation has changed, because it hasn't got a lot of rewards for a lot of people.
You don't think it pays reasonably well? I mean, compared to the hard-up media, it pays pretty well, doesn't it?
It does now, doesn't it?
But not
Take it
compared
into
to,
director's fees and you're made, don't you?
Yes, exactly.
but not really compared to the private sector.
No.
You know, not compared to what a CEO would get in the private sector. And I know that of some people that were considering standing, but the pay was an issue.
That being said, is it really a full-time job? Should it have to be a full-time job, or should it be seen as a bit of a side issue for people who have other pursuits in their life?
It could be a part-time job, depending on how the mayors determine the job is. I mean, they can, to a large degree, write their own script. I know that Gary Moore would disagree entirely. He would say that it's absolutely a full-time job. In fact, it's probably a two-man job. But if you were to adopt a style where you're more of a chairman than a president, you might be able to spread things around a bit more, and we might have a little more democracy.
All right. By the way, Jim Anderton and the double act that he intended to pursue prior to September 4, was that a gaffe that he may regret tomorrow?
Absolutely. I mean, he started off by saying, I can do both, which immediately made, the one-eyed Canterbury and think, oh, are we not as, important as central government? And he eventually had to concede that with the earthquake, the Mayoralty was much bigger and he did need to focus on that. I think he would have lost the election had he not made that strategic decision change. So good on him for doing so, though I think there are many voters that hold it against him that he made that decision so late.
I also think, though, when he finally made that decision, he made it 8 days too late. I mean, it was a no-brainer on the 4th of September. The Mayor of Christchurch was going to have a massive job.
I think
It took Jim 8 days to come to that conclusion. I know he had to consult with some electorate staff and talk to others, Megan Woods and co like that, but to me, a week's a long week in politics. 7 days is a long time in politics. 8 days.
Would we have paid attention though if we'd made it any earlier? In those 4th, 5th, 6th of December, there was...
Well, I don't know if Jim Anderton even got one column inch in that first week after the earthquake. Was he actually anywhere for that
I think
first
Sadly,
Was he?
Jim's biggest gaffe was not to go and buy a flak jacket like Bob did. I mean, obviously winners wear flak jackets.
With the high visibility colouring.
John Key wore one. Bob never took his off for a month.
I think Anderton, though, was damned if he did and damned if he didn't at that stage.
And I know that at that point, he made a strategic decision that he wasn't going to politicise the earthquake. We rang him. We wanted to get some comment from him in those days afterwards, and he said, no, I'm not getting involved. I'm not politicising this. Though that says a lot about his morals. Whether it was an intelligent, strategic decision is another matter.
Yes. Yeah. OK, we'll take a break. Plenty more to come with our media panel on the eve of Election Day. Do stay with us.